Welcome to this week's Desk Side Chat. This week, I have a former colleague joining me from LPL, David Cook. David, appreciate you joining us this week.
No, glad to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity. Very excited. Very excited, by the way.
We're excited to have you. Our topic for this week, David, is key habits for highly effective advisors. And I know you have a lot of insight on this topic, as well as other things that are helping advisors to be successful. I know you well. A lot of people in our community know you, but if you wouldn't mind just starting out by providing a little bit of a background on yourself, your career, and what you do currently with LPL, David.
Yeah, perfect. Well, first off, hey, I'm a father, a husband and a dad before all else. So you'll see Lucy and Quint's dad on my profile there. But here outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, a little rural area called Mount Holly, about 40 minutes from the LPL home office. So a lot of people are familiar with this sort of general vicinity if you've ever been to the Carolinas. So certainly, hey, been here about 20 years. Been in the financial services industry about 17 years, believe it or not. Started with, a firm that everybody's probably familiar with, Vanguard. So really kind of understand the other side of it. For the first decade or so, I'm dealing with retail investors. So really, interacting with retail investors. That's where I got my license. That's where I really kind of understood and learned the investment planning process. And just fell in love with the business, to be quite honest with you. So very quickly got acclimated there and took a leadership position, and really started to develop and understand all aspects of the business, from that particular point moving forward. The last 5 years or so, from 2012 to 2017, I was really focused on, helping them transition their strategy from, hey, we're more of a product provider, engaging in servicing clients who hold our products, to there's a grand opportunity in the financial planning space and the advisory space for advisors to really add alpha to folks who are sort of using our portfolio products. So, really the last 5 years we're laser focused on helping them penetrate their 5 million retail investors and getting in front of them and understanding who lack the time, willingness, and ability to manage their own investments and add some advisor alpha. Hence, their really big push into the managed device market. So certainly familiar with what advisors are doing in that instance. Came in 2017 and really transitioned over to the independent side of the industry. And since then, 2017, whether it's been in an investment management consulting capacity or a practice management consulting capacity, have been working with advisors, institutions, RAs of all shapes and sizes to really help them determine, hey, what their priorities and challenges are, and how to really scale, make their business profitable, and live the best life they want to live as an independent or advisor in whatever construct that they sort of fell into the industry at the current time.
Great. And so I appreciate that background. Obviously, a lot of relevant experience background that you brought, not just in working with independent advisors. I think that background, David, prior to your current role is hopefully helped you in terms of being more valuable resource for advisors. I know it's been a very valuable resource for us in the community. So now turning into the topic for this week, David, key habits for highly effective advisors. Again, this is an informal discussion. I know that there's a lot that we can get into on this topic, but high level, what are some of the key areas that you've seen advisors focus on from a habit perspective in order to be as effective as possible?
Yeah, no, so that's a great topic, right? I think it's a big and large topic. So what I will say is really, for purposes of the conversation today, I'd sort of concentrate and focus on we're defining, high performing in the realm of client acquisition, right? So when you think about wanting to grow, wanting to scale your business, but you need to do that responsibly, there's a certain way to do it, right? So there's behaviors. Some things feel uncomfortable. Some things may be different from what you've done in the past. So we're really just focusing on just from a client acquisition standpoint. So really appreciate kind of the tee up there, John. And there's six particular sort of behaviors and habits that are not really going to be all that foreign to many people who are listening or may listen to this, post-mortem, the live call today. And we'll just kind of jump into those. I'd love for, people to chime in, ask questions. But when we really look at the 6 habits, they're focused on time management. So the amount of time that you're really, spending on client acquisition and or business development activities versus getting caught up in the minutia of really running the business, right? I'd argue, to kind of oversimplify, that there's two sides of it. There's an administrative and a clerical side, and from an operation standpoint, and there's also the investment management side, right? Which both of them are critically important to being successful in creating outcomes for your clients, which is the reason we do it, right? So time management is really the first thing that we kind of break down and construct there, right? What we're seeing just in general is if you sort of give yourself a baseline to sort of get to, is that 70% of your time, if you were to sort of look and earmark hours, minutes that you're spending on activities throughout the week, those advisors that are really most effective in client acquisition are focusing at least 70% of their hours on meeting with clients, prospects, or centers of influence, things that are really going to impact strategic growth from that perspective. So the time management piece is huge. The second thing we really look at is the business development tactics, right? Hey, we talked about, hey, you need to have time on your hands to really be proactive and be on your front foot. I talk with thousands of advisors, and I've talked with thousands of advisors in the past, and I could probably count on two hands how many advisors really have a strategic business development role or strategic business development system or process within their firm, right? They may be doing strategic business development activities, and tactics, but do you have an actual strategy that sort of informs you being on your front foot and being proactive when it comes to the who, what, why, when, and where from a business development execution standpoint? So one thing that we really talk about is, hey, how do you essentially make sure that you are trying out different things, right? There's over probably 40 tactics that we see on a consistent basis that advisors are utilizing, anywhere from client referrals to educational seminars to podcasting to TV and radio, just to kind of name a few. And some of those are quite non-traditional, right? So there's some things that you could try out, some things you could do. But the takeaway when you look at the data broadly is, your average advisor is probably using 3 to 5 tactics on average from a business development standpoint. And the takeaway that we see, and I have seen, is, hey, you probably want to double that, right? Data shows that when you have at least 8 particular activities and things that you're executing on a consistent basis, the top performers are there, right? So at least 8 things that you're sort of have systematized within your particular firm on a regular basis that are slated just against business development. Kind of getting to halftime here. I think this one's sort of a topic that everybody hears, right? So I won't spend as much time on it, but technology. Which tech tools can advisors use and how can they use them, right? You always constantly want to be looking at your tech stack, right? They're going to have implications from a efficiency standpoint, accuracy and quality control standpoint, a scalability standpoint, a risk management standpoint, right? So we're there. It's just no fighting it. Are there things within the industry, within the practice, that technology doesn't have to be integrated into and does not have to be the baseline for use? Of course. But technology and constantly sort of looking at the tools and having a process, whether it be you or having a trusted consultant that can really help you go through the different alternatives and things that you're utilizing and how much value you're able to generate through your particular tech stack. So I'll kind of stop there at halftime and ensure that we don't have any questions, right? So those are sort of the first 3 things that are really, really critical for you to kind of understand, where the value lies and where it fits into your particular formula as an advisor when it comes to client acquisition and growth. So, John, I'll turn it back over to you just to make sure we don't have any questions or comments or reactions prior to sort of getting into the second half of the conversation, which is going to be focused around, the next 3 habits or behaviors of highly performing advisors.
Lots of questions, David. This is something that so much of what we're doing, it's an ongoing discussion. These are things that the other day technology came up in the group, and we're very likely going to be creating a dedicated breakout space specific to technology. And then inside of technology, there's, so many different, let's just create a space that's specific to financial planning, a space that's specific to money management. There's so many of these different things that are just going to be an ongoing conversation. I guess the thing that strikes me that I wanted to ask you about as a starting point is, you work with independent advisors. Practice sizes could be a solo shop, could be someone who's part of a larger group. Uh, what, how do advisors try to do things, find what's important, or where they can spend their time, and what areas they should be outsourcing in finding these outside, whether it be consultants, whether it be outside services to help them on these areas. If I'm an advisor and I'm in one of these different spheres, again, straight independent, or I'm part of a team, what areas would you recommend I focus on first if I know that my area of expertise needs to be with the clients, and I know I need to do some sort of outsourcing? Where would you recommend starting in these
Yeah.
topics we've talked about so far?
No, that's a great question, right? And I think like the time management piece is big, right? And I think it's purposefully put sort of on the first thing, right? Because you have to have time to really execute things well. In that planning, I think people sort of underestimate sort of that discovery process and that planning process. Advisors are typically talented people. They're typically very intuitive and natural when it comes to a lot of the skills that you do need to be successful in our business. When it comes to communicating well, relationship management, really understanding of sort of the investment world, and sort of how to manage portfolios, things of that nature. But there's some other things that we need a little bit more time out of the CEO seat, when you're in that advisor sort of picture that's trying to grow, trying to really build something as far as a better tomorrow. So I think that time management piece is really the first piece. And you want to make sure you have a good discovery process and understand who's wearing what hat within the practice, right? Advisors just wear too many hats. Like there's the CEO, there's the chief marketing officer, there's the chief technology officer, there's the chief information officer, there's the chief investment officer, there's the chief client, relationship management officer. There's all these hats. So I think sort of the first place you want to start, and it really goes hand in hand with that time management piece, is like, who do I want to be? What do I like doing? What sort of table stakes, things that I have to do to ensure that I'm not compromising as far as my client experience and the value proposition that I really want to provide. So what's non-negotiable, right? And I think you'll sort of parlay into an understanding of like, okay, what can I do and what can I sort of keep in my core? And it needs to be focused in that CEO seat, to be quite honest with you. And then, you certainly kind of go into sort of the domino effect from there. And that will sort of be a great exercise for you to determine, like, number one, what am I good at? What do I want to be doing? And number two, like, what needs to still be done, but it just simply needs to be done either by someone else, outsourcing technology, etc.
So, and maybe, this again could go into any topic, but maybe specifically to business development. I think something that you said is extremely important is to have many different activities going. And this is something that a lot of us have talked to advisors about, is just do something, have some activity going.
Mhm.
What would be, in your mind, generally speaking, whether it be a podcast, whether it be a newsletter, whether it be social media marketing, what's a length of time in your mind in general that I should try to dedicate to one of those different areas before I realize it might be time to pivot and do something else? How long should I spend, trying to run, if at first I'm not really getting a lot of traction? How long should I spend, continuing to go down that track before I realize I might need to try and do something else to augment what I've originally started?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think once again, this is where it's sort of indicative of how much time, you really want to spend on your strategy, right? Because there's short-term strategies and there are long-term strategies, right? And I think when people think of business development tactics, they automatically go into like, hey, what am I deploying? What can people see? What can people touch? But if you think about this, right? Joining a board, if you join a board, that's a business development tactic, right? You're essentially joining a board to have a network, have access to certain relationships. It's going to show your particular value proposition, your understanding of how to run large organizations, hold people accountable, generate results, things of that nature. So that's business development all day long. But I would argue that most advisors don't think of that as business development. But is that a short-term strategy or a long-term strategy, right? that's a long-term strategy, right? So you're not going to be able to put a key performance indicator in play and get results immediately from a strategy like that versus something where you're, paying a lead provider or working with the vendor to sort of do paid advertisement, things of that nature. So I'd say, really it's dependent upon your results, which leads me to another aspect. There's a lot of, things that are difficult about the marketing world, which, they can be solved, but it really takes some time and attention is the tracking and reporting, right? Because you could be doing a lot of tactics, you could be spending a lot of time, but if you don't have good tactics and reporting, you're not able to sort of revisit and see what's working, what needs to be pivoted so we can try to get better results, and what we want to sort of put in the pile of, hey, we tried it, trial by fire. We failed fast because we had a system in place to be able to track and measure the success, and not everybody's good at everything. And I think that's another aspect that you want to put into it, right? If you're not good at having conversations with network or colleagues and things of that nature, then that's something that you can practice. That's something you can talk about. If you're not good at business development, it's nothing wrong with looking to bring a business development person on your team. So I think that that's one thing that we talk about when we talk about trying different methods and different things that are unique. Is I'd be more than happy to share some data and some information that could be valuable to kind of give examples. But certainly I think not being afraid to fail, not being afraid to try things that may not give you return, but you have to be calculated, you have to be systematic, you have to know when to fold, and things of that nature are all very important factors into that. So I'd say certainly that's a loaded question as far as how much time, but you really just have to look at, I'd say more or less than looking for that answer, you want to look at, like, what am I good at? What am I trying? Is this a short-term strategy? Is this a long-term strategy? How am I measuring the success of this and holding accountable and being disciplined to that, as far as actually having a process to, do the business development, measure the effectiveness of it, and then look at your overall process to see what you want to add, subtract, or keep doing from an actual tactic standpoint.
I love that. You have to track it. So many times you'll hear this, whether it be seminars or whatever, it was so effective that I quit doing it. Right. It's like, so define effective, right? What metrics do you have in place? How are you tracking that? I think that's such an important thing that advisors need to focus on. Let's move on and move into the next set of key habits, David.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, kind of get into the next set of key habits. I think, everybody will certainly be, very familiar with a lot of these concepts as well. I think, what we're doing, we're not necessarily seeing advisors reinvent the wheel. We're just seeing advisors really, become accustomed to change, and you have the confluence of the way the world is really, set up nowadays. And doing some things a little different, whether it's leaning into it deeper, they've kind of done these things at a high level, or they're really saying, like, hey, okay, I haven't done this at all, I want to try it. Or some advisors saying, I'll do this every once in a while, but I want to systematize it and really make it a core part of my business. So these second half of behaviors and habits, certainly will resonate, I think, with this particular audience. So this one's a good one, right? I see a couple of folks on the call today who are experts and specialists in this particular field. So I think this will definitely resonate in their testament to how you can really have success when you lean into this, but engaging clients beyond portfolio construction and really just making financial planning a huge part of what you're doing, right? In-depth financial planning, is this generation's fee-based account. It's sort of like what pundits are thinking, and what we see from a result standpoint. So there's three ways that we really see advisors having success in ensuring that you have financial planning as a part, and you're getting the value that those advisors are seeing in the growth formula there. So really just expand your planning knowledge. So whether you're doing goals-based plans today, or you're getting deeper into the plan to begin, the planning process and topics that you don't dive into today, but you want to get more into. I think, tax analysis and estate planning, cash flow planning are really three sort of hot buttons that we're seeing people be successful in, and kind of, creating differentiated value, beyond just that goals-based planning. Because when it comes to complex tax situations, estate planning situations, cash flow analysis for business owners, things of that nature, equity consulting. All those things are very much on the front edge of where there's not many people in the marketplace that you can sort of look at as like specialists, right? I think there's a lot of runway there from that perspective. And a lot of it is in language and how you make sure people know that you have specific planning knowledge, right? If I say the word financial planning right now, it means 8 million things to, 9 million different people, right? So, I think, making sure if you do financial planning, not taking for granted that you having a CFP or a CHFC or some, other indicator that you are a specialist in that realm, that you really make sure your narrative, your language, your value proposition is coming through as far as, hey, this is the way I get people to understand planning, or this is my process. This is why it's unique. This is why I have more success, from that perspective. Taking a deeper dive into like sophisticated technology is another thing from a planning standpoint. When you talk about doing more in-depth planning, there's more time that's involved in that. So I think when you talk about planning, it definitely needs to go hand in hand and get to a point to where you really look at your tech stack and understand the financial planning technology that you feel is best for you when it comes to inputting client data and producing a comprehensive plan. You'll have several choices out there, as everybody on this call knows and everybody in the universe knows. But certainly, I think, that world moves fast enough to where we see advisors actually have, outsized gains or an advantage when it comes to their time and the scalability based on the actual tools that they're utilizing, whether, some of those tools have constraints as far as the topics and the deliverables, and or some advisors just feel like it's quicker, more intuitive, faster to generate reporting and deliverables from certain tools. And then consider a designation, right? I think everybody's kind of caught on to that, but that kind of stands you apart from the crowd. So that's not necessarily rocket science from that standpoint. Sort of moving on, because I do want to make sure we have time for other questions. And everybody's got competing priorities here, but a multi-generational approach. So really connecting with all generations in a single family, right? So, and when we say connecting, we don't mean just kind of knowing their name and meeting them, but where we're seeing advisors have success in that client acquisition in that growing phase is those people who actually have people ingested into the actual process, right? There's different tactics. I think we see 7 or 8 tactics that are really sort of important, right? Including the family-based plan, right? So calling it a family-based plan, not necessarily focusing on one individual, and or introducing the ideas of the family-based plan or a family-based discovery process. Requiring both spouses to be in all meetings, if that works out. We have sort of situations where that's not always the best. And you folks are the best to kind of determine, and have a discretion, but don't necessarily assume one way or the other is the best thing to do, right? Offering initial, free consultations to younger family members, right? To really get them on that path of getting comfortable of having that conversation with you, or, really, getting them engaged in the process and adding some value to them beyond, just, kind of a social or supplemental, high and buy that you have as far as their parents or your main client base is concerned. Asking all the heirs and beneficiaries to come to at least one meeting per year, and then, so there's all types of things that we've seen out there, whether it be providing investors with tools, younger investors with educational aspects, things of that nature. ESG is a little bit of a slant and tilt too. I'd say when you talk about multi-generational planning, you want to make sure that when you look at your product stack and your process, that you do have something that's attractive to all generations, right? Every once in a while, as business owners, as people who have been super successful, we can kind of get our head down in our process. But that's another takeaway, John. I would say definitely when it comes to that multi-generational approach, test yourself, show somebody in each generation your website, show everybody in each generation your content, and maybe give them a little feedback form or a quiz. It doesn't have to be a client, right? It could be a family member, whatever. And I think you'd be very surprised at what they would think, or like, what are you really interested in, or what would you be thinking about? Or if you have a network of friends who, certainly have investable assets at this point in time, like what are they talking about from the investment world, things of that nature. So making sure that you're attractive to everybody and you're not just being, sort of exclusive when it comes to the generational gaps in silos from that perspective. The last thing I'll talk about before we sort of pause for more questions would be building a team, right? Or partnering with other advisors. I think, that doesn't necessarily mean aggregating and you being sort of this umbrella and kind of having people who are attaching on to you. We see, different ways of building a team, right? Hire peers with skill sets that complement yours, right? Not everybody's good at everything. So, partnerships sometimes are very powerful when you talk about, hey, I know I love doing this. I want to go full throttle. I want to be on my front foot. I'm kind of having production destruction by something else that's really important to the bigger picture, but I just don't have the time, effort, or energy, or, want to do that, right? So complementary hires or complementary partnerships are something that we see very favorable in the marketplace when it comes to growth. Hiring a junior advisor who can take lower value tasks. We kind of see a couple of different ways of people doing that. Depending upon like what the end goal is, there's kind of two sides of that, right? What's your goal for bringing the other advisor in, and what do you want? And then, hey, this is an employee, this is a person. What are their goals? You want to make sure they're kind of mutually aligned, right? So we see a couple different ways. Some people bring junior advisors in and put them more in an administrative clerical capacity because that allows them to kind of really understand language and operations of the business, things of that nature. Some advisors would argue that they don't necessarily want their new advisors even learning that, right? They want them to come in off the back, sort of as that rainmaker, business development, CEO mindset from that perspective. Some people bringing an advisor who will never be a rainmaker, right? There's this idea of a servicing advisor, and believe it or not, there are hundreds of thousands of people out there who want to be an advisor. They love the business, but they never want to be an asset gatherer or a rainmaker, right? So we see a lot of success in people actually hiring servicing advisors who would never, want to necessarily take over or be that partner, things of that nature from that perspective. Acquire practice. Inorganic growth is always the fastest way to grow. And then, we do see some join ups and some teaming aspects where you, sort of the advisor who's sort of been in the single silo, sees partnership with a bigger construct. There's just so much movement within the mergers acquisition markets, things of that nature. So I'll kind of stop there. That was the slate of the 6 habits that I see out here when consulting advisors on many levels, from making sure that they have a system in place to really drive significant growth in a responsible manner within their practice.
A lot, right? And like I said, these are topics that are evergreen. We'll keep coming back to more often as they become, they're important today. They'll continue to be more important going forward, and it's helpful to have a resource, to have someone who can help be a guide, be a consultant. A lot of the people who are involved in our community and beyond, Good Advisors Finish First, are with LPL. David, how would an advisor engage with you and your team, and how can you help advisors navigate all these different areas?
Yeah, definitely. I think, certainly we've helped advisors, at all levels, right? We try to meet advisors where they are. I'd say, first and foremost, my goal is to sort of educate and take advisors through sort of a due diligence process, whether it be comparing, with alternatives or different journeys you'd be able to take to try to solve or find a solution for something. We have a great website that sort of goes over different case studies, whether it be the why, what, and the how advisors interact and sort of outsource, to certain solutions. So that's lplbusinesssolutions.com is the name of the public website. No gate, no login or secure information needed. Simply a public website that allows you to go and explore, no matter who you are, as far as the outsourcing, partnership model that we've sort of created. My email personally is david.cookiv at lplfinancial.com. Certainly you'd be more than happy to engage at any level and have a conversation. I typically work with advisors from Maine to South Carolina, about 17 states, right? So, but certainly, would be more than happy to kind of serve as a conduit and make sure that a partnership or education was had at any level with the correct, consultant, because, we want to start a good relationship to where we understand the advisor's concept first and foremost, right? We try not to be prescriptive in any part of our process, and truly live into a consultative process, because advisors, hey, they've when by the time they've gotten to me, in most senses, they survived and kind of understood what it takes to manage the business. It's just more about kind of discovering their strengths and where they feel they need to partner up, with someone that's a specialist and or that they feel has more time to really execute better from that perspective.
Well, we're incredibly fortunate to have you as a resource, both again for the community and beyond. So I appreciate you sharing your information. This is so much wider and bigger than just advisors. Good people finish first. There's great people out there that are going to be helpful, that can be a resource for advisors. Again, we're extremely fortunate to have you as a dedicated resource for us. David, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it. We will cut off this public portion and then bring on some Q&A with folks on the call. Thank you, David.
Perfect. No worries. Glad to be here. Really appreciate you having me.